No turning back. Oh my gosh. You may be wondering, why did I cut the top of my Fiddle Leaf Fig like this? Keep watching while I talk about fiddle leaf propagation and care. Fiddle Leaf Fig, aka Ficus Lyrata, are one of the most popular houseplants of the last, at least decade or so, as they are very architectural plants. They look really great in houses, on patios. They have these distinctive, large, dark green leaves, which, if maintained properly, are absolutely beautiful, but they are known as being a bit of a diva plant. Most people complain that after buying them, they'll bring them back home and they start to drop all their leaves, turn brown, look terrible. So hopefully I've got some tips that will help you not only grow a fantastic Fiddle Leaf Fig, but also propagate that into new plants. I got this Fiddle Leaf Fig about 2 years ago from the clearance section at Home Depot, and it's been pretty happy. It lived inside our house. You can see we have these big floor-to-ceiling windows. It's always been pretty good about putting out new growth. But at the end of this summer, we started getting work done on our house and we put it out on my very sunny patio. And what did it do? It grew so tall, it started hitting the roof. Not only that, it is just a sort of a single stem Fiddle Leaf Fig or Ficus Lyrata. So I wanted to be able to put it back into the house and also get some branching. So one of the tips with getting a Fiddle Leaf Fig to create new branches is by simply lopping the top off, which is what I did. In choosing a spot to cut, I took a good look at each of the leaves, which is also known as a node, and I noticed up here there was a little growth node sticking out, which is a good sign that that could encourage some good new branching growth. And there was a few nodes here right above this leaf. So at about 5 foot tall, I braved it and gave it this new cut. Here's the top of the tree, which I couldn't see, it had gotten so tall. The newest leaves are pretty big, which is a sign of it being fairly happy, I think because it's getting so much light. But ficus like this, many of the other plants in the fig family and ficus family, such as rubber trees and even regular old figs, can be cut and repropagated from their branches. I should note, sometimes people put fallen leaves into water and they will root, which is cool, but they'll never grow new trees. They'll just be like rooted leaves. So it's kind of like the leaf will stay alive, but you won't get a new tree growth. But if you have a tree with a node, and if you're wondering what a node is, it is this sort of line, which is where the leaves come out of. You can see little dots. Those are where new roots will come out of. So as long as you have a node area, you should be able to get roots, and this will continue on growing into its own tree. So for this tree, I, in theory, don't have to do anything. This should just start growing branches on its own. It will be slow. It'll be probably several months before we see any real growth, but I want to encourage the growth. So like I said, I saw this little node growth point I'm pretty excited about, but I want to encourage branching from multiple sides. So I'm going to try out this product. This is not sponsored. I just simply have seen this on videos myself. Keiki cloning paste. I think it's mostly used for orchids, but it can certainly be used on lots of other plants, and it should encourage the plant to create new growths on the side to help with the branching. So in theory, this could also work even if you didn't cut off the top of your tree and just wanted to encourage growth. Okay, so in the kit comes a few things. Instructions, of course, And then the little, kind of like little cotton swabs that you use to dab the cloning paste with, and the little jar of cloning paste itself. So let's check out the instructions. So in the instructions, they show a number of different plants that this is useful for. And I think even if you don't see your specific plant, there's probably things that are close, like Ficus elastica, that's rubber plant. That is the same family as our Ficus Lyrata, which is a Fiddle Leaf Fig. So it's explaining that on this, nodes sit just below the thin lines or bumps, segmenting the stem. Scoring the node will release milky sap. So they're talking about rubber tree. It'll also be the same with the Fiddle Leaf Fig. So the trick is to find a node, score the node lightly with a needle or small knife, dip your cotton swab or toothpick into the Keiki paste, and dab the Keiki paste onto the scored part of the node. So as you can see, this works on a number of different plants. I have these little clippers, and I should note I did sanitize them. Yes, they do have a little bit of rust, but they have been sanitized. I like to use isopropyl alcohol. It's important to sanitize your clippers because you can pass disease unknowingly if you cut one plant that maybe has a disease and then cut the other plant. And so we want to avoid that. So by giving your cutters a real good clean with isopropyl alcohol, you're going to make sure that they stay nice and clean. I think what I'm gonna do is just like kind of score a little bump, maybe up here. So this one I'm gonna leave because I think that's just a growth on its own. Let's look around on the other side of this plant. As the instructions mention, all these lines, those are nodes. As mentioned in the instruction, it says score the node just below the thin line, and milky sap will come out. That's what happened when I cut the top. So I'm going to score this node. I'm just gonna do a little bit of a cut right below the node until a little bit of sap comes out. Okay, I think that's pretty good. There's a little bit of sap. Okay, here's the sap coming out. Just gonna dab it until it stops. We'll dab the top as well. Now I have my cloning paste. I'm just gonna take a little dab of it and stick it right in there. Okay. I'm also gonna add the paste to this little growth here. I think that might help it grow. And then it'd be nice to have growth all around. So I'm gonna spin this around. Okay, so we have another area here. Let's see. Let's try this upper node here, because we have that lower node for the other part, and we'll try the upper node here. It's funny, you can already see where there's a little bit of sap cut right there. Hopefully this will just help it even a little bit more. So we now have 1, 2, and on this side, 3 areas of this chopped ficus that should start growing new growths, new branching growths with the help of the Keiki cloning paste. So I'm gonna pick out a water propagation vessel. I mean, the mason jar, you can't go wrong with that, but I'm actually gonna choose this one because this is kind of big, kind of cute. Another step, which is not totally necessary, but I like to use it, this is rooting hormone. It's a powder that you put on the ends of your plants that you want to propagate, and it just helps promote rooting. So I pop that in there. So this is just straight up hose water, nothing fancy. So I have my very large cutting, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to dip it into the water. So the end has been wetted. I'm going to get it into this rooting hormone powder. I'm going to rub that rooting hormone all along where these nodes are, because as mentioned, that is where the roots are going to come out. They're not just coming out at the bottom, they'll come out the sides there too. Rub that on all along there and the bottom. And then I'm going to place it straight in. I'm just going to shove it in. And hopefully I might have to rethink this jar. It might be too heavy a piece, but generally that's how I'd have it. Okay, so I've got my Fiddle Leaf Fig in this jar. I think I need to rethink this because this is so heavy. If it was a smaller piece, I think this would be better. But this is all you really need to do. You can see the rooting powder is in there. It's got a lot of the nodes in contact with the water, which is important. And it might be a little bit slow, but we should start to see roots coming in the next couple of weeks, or at least we'll see some signs of rootlets forming. We get little kind of like fuzzy white dots where the roots will come out. All right, take two. I've reapplied my rooting hormone, and I am gonna go with a good old-fashioned mason jar. I think that'll be a little bit of a safer bet. It still needs to be propped up a little bit, but I think this will be better for, you know what? I think we gotta lose this leaf too. Yeah. So what I might do is I might stake that up so it doesn't fall over, but this should start rooting within the next couple of weeks. So I ended up putting my propagation in with its mommy tree, or itself I should say. I've popped it in there and it's staked onto there to keep it upright. I figure that's a safe bet, and we know it's happy in this spot, perfect conditions, and that should grow roots pretty soon. Fiddle Leaf Figs actually propagate in water so readily. This is another Fiddle Leaf Fig I rescued from Home Depot, and the nursery pot was actually in this, and it rained. It got full of water. I left it in for a few days. You'll notice when this gets full of water, it ended up getting waterlogged, and then it was basically up to water here, and it started growing roots here, almost like as if it was repropagating itself. So water propagation, or even if you tried air layering, these do propagate pretty easily. So also as part of our Fiddle Leaf Fig care, as mentioned, we were getting work done to our house, so there was a lot of dust, and these leaves are very big, and that is one thing, whether you are propagating them or not, you should make a habit of dusting the leaves, because the dust will prevent them from photosynthesizing, and these are a pretty light, hungry plant. So, you know, every week, every 2 weeks or so, at least minimum once a month, you should be going through and giving your leaves a really good rub down. Because these leaves can get damaged, you will notice some of these have received cracks, and they don't come back for that. Anyone who's struggled with a Fiddle Leaf Fig will know once these leaves are damaged, they don't come back. So you want to kind of give it, you can rub them pretty hard, but give them a little bit of support from the back, because they can crack really easily. They do kind of come up with their own little natural shine. I know you can purchase leaf shine. I usually just use a slightly damp cloth to rub the dust off of my leaves. Fiddle Leaf Figs are also a plant that will tell you how they're feeling based on the way their leaves can kind of either simply fall off, which to me is usually a sign that they're not getting enough sunlight, or, you know, like all plants, overwatering, underwatering. This is always a thing. So usually if your Fiddle Leaf Figs leaves are brown from the middle or have brown spots in the middle, that is a sign of overwatering or poor drainage. They are plants that like to have really nice, well-drained soil. And it's really impossible for me to say, oh, water once a week or once a month. You really need to check the soil. If the soil, you know, one of the top things that I do is I will actually go and stick my finger in the soil. If the soil is, you know, dry on the top, it could still be very damp inside. You want to make sure that the soil is really pretty dry before you water again. You're better off underwatering these plants than you are overwatering. That said, you can absolutely underwater your plant, and if your leaves are turning brown and crispy on the edges, that's usually a sign of underwatering and they need to be watered more often. I've also found, you'll notice the difference between these leaves. So when I purchased this plant, as I mentioned, I bought it from Home Depot. It was on clearance, and you can see this is probably, these dark green leaves are probably when it was in the greenhouse. Then it moved to an indoor spot at Home Depot and got zero light, and it produced these pretty sad looking, very thin yellowish leaves, and it has longer spaces between the growth nodes. Again, that's a sign that this tree wasn't getting enough light. I brought it home, put it in better light, the nodes became closer together, and the leaves started getting nice and dark and large again. It's also one thing to note that a lot of times when you buy these plants, especially when you buy it from a place like Home Depot or Costco or places that aren't direct nurseries, but, you know, vendors, so to speak, they have come from greenhouse conditions, the ideal growing conditions, and they move to these other locations and they do get stressed out. So I think that's also one of the reasons sometimes these plants fail on people, and that's why people call them difficult plants. You want to check the soil. Sometimes they're not in the best soil for growing, and you might want to repot them. You don't have to repot them. I have never repotted this plant. The roots seem healthy, the soil seems pretty good. If I find that it starts having problems, I probably would take it out and take a look at the roots, but so far it's been okay, so I haven't done that. You know, I'm kind of the feeling, don't mess with something unless you really have to. As far as fertilizing these plants, they do like to be fertilized every so often. You can just use a general houseplant fertilizer, or sometimes I find that those slow release fertilizer sticks are great because you can kind of set it and forget about it, and they'll slowly release the fertilizer. So make sure you're getting the right fertilizer for leafy plants or house plants. These aren't necessarily houseplants here in California. They, as you can see, they do fantastically well on patios. People even grow them as trees, just planted straight into the soil here, and they do fantastically well. But this is California and we have our own magical climate, so they're not frost-resistant plants. They have to be somewhere where you know they're going to get pretty much warm weather year-round. So like with most all houseplants, you don't want to underwater, but you also most definitely do not want to overwater, and you want to make sure that when you water, you have plenty of drainage, as these plants can suffer from rot when they're left in very soggy, wet soil. But my number one tip for having a happy, healthy Fiddle Leaf Fig is light. These plants really need a lot of light. If you don't have them next to a sunny window, I've had some people describe, can the tree see blue sky? If not, it's not getting enough light. You don't have to have it next to a window as long as you have a grow light. And there are so many grow lights on the market these days that just fit into like regular light fixtures and can look really pretty. I've seen a lot of people do some really cool ones where they're like hanging from the ceiling down on the plant, almost like a little bit of an art piece. You don't need giant industrial grow lights these days. So many of them can actually look like a regular light fixture in your home and be part of your home's look. Failing that, maybe, move the plant into place if you have people over and it's part of your decor, and then move it into a bright sunny place when you're out of the house, like when you leave for work, say, for example. As mentioned, give them a really good dusting, and not just like a dusting, like a good dusting and rub down. That will help bring out the natural oils in the leaf, and it will also take off the dust, which will help them photosynthesize, which means it helps them use the available light that they have, and they will be much happier. If you find your leaves are pale and a little bit thin, they probably need more light. If the leaves get damaged, they don't grow back from that damage, so either remove that leaf. Some people kind of cut pieces out of them for them to look okay. I've found that actually makes them go brown, so you might be better off trimming back any very badly damaged leaves. Otherwise, like here's an example. This leaf has a little bit of damage. That was like that before I purchased it. I just leave it be. You don't really notice it. I hope this video has been helpful on your Fiddle Leaf Fig journey. You can always leave comments down below. I'm happy to answer them. I also have the products that I use linked below if that's helpful for you. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram, and of course, subscribe.